When rescuers arrived at the scene, they were horrified to find the girl frozen solid. She had been lying in the snow for more than 6 hours and her body was as stiff as a board. The doctors later said that she was technically already dead. Her pulse was almost impossible to detect. However, despite all this, the miracle happened. The girl slowly defrosted and woke up with no visible signs of injury. So how did she survive such a terrifying ordeal? Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to look into the shocking case of the frozen hell. 19-year-old Jean Hilliard from North Dakota, USA, was an adventurous teenager. She loved camping and being in nature. That's why when her and her boyfriend Dalton Godfrey decided to go to a friend's cabin for New Year's celebrations, she was excited. But what she didn't know was that it would be the scariest experience of her life. On December 2013, Jean and Dalton set out for their friend's cabin with 3 other friends. After 4 hours of driving through heavy snow, they finally reached their destination. They parked their car and started sledding and drinking. But by 4:30 p.m., the temperature had dropped to a bone-chilling 22 degrees Fahrenheit or 30 degrees Celsius. So the teenagers decided to call it a day and head back home. They all piled into the car. Jean sat in the front passenger seat while Dalton drove. The couple was hugging and kissing. Then suddenly, Dalton screamed, "Oh my God, we have a flat tire." He quickly pulled over on the side of the road and switched on the hazard lights. Meanwhile, it started snowing heavily, and within minutes, the surroundings were covered in a thick blanket of white. It was too dark for them to see anything, so Dalton turned on the car's headlights and got out of the vehicle to check the tire. Meanwhile, Jean kept yelling at him to hurry up because she was freezing, but he couldn't hear her. The wind was blowing so hard that it muffled her screams. As Dalton was checking the tire, he noticed that there was no spare tire or tire repair kit in the trunk. One of the girls in the back seat suggested that someone might have taken it. They spent half an hour discussing what they should do next. And when they finally came up with a plan, it was too late. The storm was getting worse, and the temperature had dropped to a record low of 18 degrees Fahrenheit or -8 degrees Celsius. One of the boys suggested that they should push the car to the nearest house, which was about a mile away. "I don't want to freeze to death here," one of the girls said, and they all agreed. So Dalton, Jean, and 2 other boys got out of the car and started pushing it through the knee-deep snow. Meanwhile, 2 girls stayed inside the car to keep themselves warm. It took them an hour to move the car 200 feet, and when they looked around, they realized that they were lost. All the trees around them looked identical, so they had no way of knowing which direction they had come from. The decision to move the car had been a bad one. "I think we're lost," one of the boys shouted over the wind. They tried calling 911, but their phones had no signal. Just when they thought things couldn't get any worse, the car rolled down a small hill and landed in a ditch. The boys pushed it back onto the road and continued walking. After another 20 minutes, they came across another road. This time, instead of waiting for help, they decided to flag down a passing motorist. A man driving a pickup truck stopped and offered to drive them to the nearest gas station. But before they could get in, a woman who was inside the truck yelled, "No, don't open the doors. They're frozen." It was the first time they had heard anyone talk about the weather since they had gotten stranded. The motorist explained that the temperature was well below zero, and if they left the car, they might never come back. He offered to drive them to a nearby motel, but they declined. They wanted to wait for the sun to rise so they could find their way back to the main road. The man nodded his head in understanding and drove off. The teenagers waited for the sun to rise, but it never did. The clouds were so thick that not a single ray of sunlight could make it through. By then, Jean's legs were numb, and she could feel her life slipping away. She knew that if they didn't get help soon, they would die of exposure. Then one of the girls spotted a building in the distance and screamed, "Help! Someone is over there." With newfound energy, they started running towards the building, but it seemed like it was miles away. When they finally reached it, they found out that it was just a storage facility. "It's too cold to open the doors," one of the boys said. But Jean begged him to try. When he opened the door, it let out a gust of freezing air that knocked them all down. Exhausted and hopeless, they collapsed on the floor. One of the girls noticed a wooden pallet nearby and told the others to climb on it. "We can use this as a shelter," she said. They wrapped their arms around each other to keep themselves warm, but it wasn't enough. They started losing consciousness one by one. At some point, Jean felt herself being lifted. She opened her eyes to find Dalton carrying her in his arms. He laid her down next to the others and whispered, "I love you, Jean." Then everything went black. They had been lying there for 6 long hours when rescuers finally found them. When they arrived at the scene, they were shocked to find the teenagers frozen solid. It looked like they had been mummified. The rescuers quickly put them in their vehicles and rushed them to the nearest hospital. At the hospital, doctors used hot water bottles and blankets to slowly warm up Jean's body. Since they didn't know how long she had been exposed to the cold, they didn't know what to expect. First, they put her in a bathtub filled with warm water, but her body showed no signs of reaction. Then they used hot towels to rub her chest, arms, and legs. Still nothing. Finally, one of the doctors placed his hand on her neck to check for a pulse. To his surprise, he felt something. "She has a pulse," he yelled, and everyone in the room gasped. They quickly transferred her to an intensive care unit where a team of doctors worked tirelessly to bring her back to life. Doctors gave Jean several injections of epinephrine, a hormone that can help increase blood flow. They also put her on a ventilator to help her breathe. For a while, it didn't seem like she would make it. At one point, her heart stopped beating and she suffered a seizure. However, against all odds, she survived. 2 days after the incident, she opened her eyes and asked, "Where am I?" Doctors were shocked. No one had expected her to survive, let alone make a full recovery. "We've never seen anything like this before," one of the doctors said. "She's a true miracle." The doctor explained that when they admitted her to the hospital, her body was so frozen that it was as stiff as a board. Her skin was cold to the touch, and she wasn't breathing on her own. They had to warm her up very slowly to prevent her organs from shutting down. "It's amazing that she survived," he said. Her body had been exposed to temperatures of -22 degrees for 6 hours. Normally, when this happens, the body shuts down within minutes. But somehow she managed to hang on. The doctor explained that when the body is exposed to such low temperatures, it goes into survival mode. This means that the body redirects all of its energy to the vital organs, which are the brain and the heart. "This is probably what kept Jean alive," he said. "Her body temperature was so low that we couldn't measure it. But even in those conditions, her heart kept beating. We don't know how long it would have kept going, but eventually her body started to warm up. This is a rare occurrence, but it's not unheard of." In 2007, a similar case occurred in Wisconsin. A woman was found frozen in a snowbank after being missing for 5 hours. She had been exposed to temperatures of -10 degrees, but when emergency workers arrived, they found that she had a pulse. She made a full recovery. After Jean was discharged from the hospital, she returned home. She had no permanent injuries from the ordeal, but she will never forget what she went through. She and her family are now sharing her story to raise awareness about the dangers of freezing temperatures. "I want people to know that hypothermia can happen to anyone," she said. "I was a healthy 19-year-old and I almost died. It was a miracle that I survived. I'm just grateful to be alive." What do you think? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to share and like. Thanks for watching. Fisherman stranded in the Pacific after a storm blows his boat off course survives for more than a year on rainwater, raw fish, and turtle blood. On November 2012, a fisherman set off from El Salvador in the hopes of making an honest living. However, what he didn't realize was that a tropical depression just off the coast would turn into a full-fledged tropical storm and blow him off course more than 6,000 miles. It took 438 days for this man to finally wash ashore. And during that time, he survived on nothing but rainwater, raw fish, and turtle blood. How did he survive such a long time out in the ocean? What kind of physical and psychological toll did it take on him? And how exactly did he make it back home? This is the incredible story of the fisherman who survived adrift at sea for 438 days. Jose Salvador Alvarenga had just finished fixing his boat and was eager to get back out to sea. So when a good fishing day presented itself, he jumped at the opportunity. But the weather conditions weren't what they seemed. While the morning started off calm and sunny, within a few hours, strong winds began to whip across the ocean, making waves twice as high as the boat Jose was sailing on. In the midst of this chaos, Jose's engine broke down, leaving him with no other choice but to throw in life buoys and hope for the best. As the storm picked up, his boat was tossed around like a toy in a giant bathtub. It was then that Jose knew he was in trouble. He tried to contact emergency services via radio, but the static only replied to him. No one could hear his cries for help. Then he looked up and saw that his anchor had come loose. Waves were crashing over the bow, threatening to swallow him whole. With a surge of adrenaline, he managed to secure the anchor once more, saving himself from being washed overboard. But soon enough, another wave struck and knocked him unconscious. When he woke up, the world around him looked vastly different. The sky was clear of clouds, and the sun beat down on him mercilessly. He looked around wildly, realizing with a growing sense of dread that his boat had drifted far from familiar waters. Jose had no idea where he was, but then he noticed something strange. There was a dead sperm whale floating close to his boat. Using all his strength, he managed to tie the whale to his vessel and then used it as a makeshift rudder to steer himself towards land. With the whale as his guide, Jose sailed for many days without food or water, subsisting only on rainwater that he collected in a plastic bottle. The whale eventually decomposed, emitting a foul odor that hung around the boat. On the 15th day, Jose spotted some dolphins, and in a moment of inspiration, he started mimicking their movements in the water in the hopes of attracting their attention. Miraculously, a pod of dolphins surrounded his boat, apparently curious about the lone sailor. Recognizing this as a sign of hope, Jose befriended them, even naming some of them, and they helped guide him across the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean. Thanks to their help, Jose was able to stay afloat for an incredible 17 days without any food or water. But the dolphins eventually swam away, leaving Jose alone once more. And soon enough, the reality of his dire situation crashed down on him again. Realizing that he might never be rescued, Jose began preparing for the worst. However, he refused to go down without a fight. He continued to collect rainwater and catch fish, which he ate raw. Sometimes he drank salty ocean water when he couldn't find any fresh water, and he used sticks and stones to defend himself against sharks. Jose also developed a routine to keep himself busy. During the day, he would collect rainwater, mend his boat, and fish. And at night, he would gaze at the stars and talk to them, sharing stories about his life before the accident. His mental fortitude kept him going, refusing to give into the despair that threatened to consume him. Jose even developed coping mechanisms to deal with the excruciating pain in his legs caused by sunburn. He would submerge his feet in seawater, which provided some relief and helped him fall asleep faster. One evening, Jose spotted what he thought was land on the horizon, but it turned out to be another false hope. Just as his spirits started to rise, they were dashed. Days turned into weeks, and still there was no sign of land. But Jose's determination never wavered. He continued to take care of himself, shaving with a shard of glass and washing his clothes with seawater. He also started talking to himself to stave off the loneliness that threatened to overwhelm him. But Jose's luck was about to change. One day, a plane flew overhead, and he waved frantically, hoping to attract their attention. However, the plane passed without acknowledging his presence. Jose felt disheartened, but he didn't give up. He continued to signal for help using mirrors and anything else he could find. It wasn't until nearly a year had passed that a ship finally spotted him. Jose's joy knew no bounds when the ship approached his boat and offered him water and food. He was too weak to respond verbally, but his eyes spoke volumes as he looked up at the people who had come to rescue him. The crew of the ship were stunned to see Jose alive and well, despite being stranded at sea for so long. They quickly offered him water and food, which he eagerly consumed. Jose must have looked like a wild man, unshaven, sun-beaten, and with long, tangled hair and nails. Yet the crew was amazed by his resilience and determination to survive. As Jose was pulled from the wreckage of his boat and placed on the ship, he couldn't help but glance back at the vast ocean that had been his home for so long. A mix of relief and sadness washed over him. Relief that his ordeal was finally coming to an end, but sadness that he would leave behind the only companion he had known for so long. Despite being emaciated and sunbaked, Jose was conscious and alert. The crew wasted no time in getting him off the boat and on land, where medical professionals were waiting to attend to him. As Jose lay on the stretcher, he couldn't help but wonder about the reception that awaited him back home. Would his family and friends be overjoyed to see him alive? Or would they think he was crazy for surviving so long at sea? Jose's ordeal had not only captured the attention of the media, but also sparked debates among experts about how he managed to survive for so long. Some were amazed by his ability to adapt to such extreme conditions, while others questioned whether his story was even possible. But for Jose, the skepticism didn't matter. He knew what he had gone through, and he was grateful to be alive. Jose was reunited with his loved ones who had never given up hope of finding him. The joy and relief were palpable as they embraced. This is the Cave of Death. It's located at the bottom of Utah's Blue John Canyon, 2,000 feet below the rim, and it got its name because many have tried to climb up this sheer rock face only to fall to their death. But that wasn't what brought Aaron Ralston to this place. He was looking for adventure, and he certainly found it. He had no idea that just around the corner from where he parked his car, an 800-pound boulder would fall and pin his arm against the wall, trapping him inside the canyon with nothing but his wits and a multi-tool to help him. And for 5 long days, this was all that stood between him and freedom. It was April 26, 2003, when Aaron set off to explore Utah's Blue John Canyon. Known to locals as the Crack, this narrow passageway is a popular hiking route among canyoneers who love to navigate the slot canyons in Utah's desert. But there was nothing slot about this canyon. This place was so narrow in some parts that if you didn't stick to the center of the passageway, you might get stuck. And even though the walls of this canyon were over 2,000 feet high, they had no trouble concealing what lurked in the distance. When Aaron came around the corner, he saw an 800-pound boulder blocking the exit. There was no way he was going to be able to shimmy past this thing or go over it. So he did the only thing he could think of. He ducked under the rock. What he didn't see was how loose the rock was. As soon as he ducked underneath, the boulder shifted, pinning his right arm against the wall and trapping him 100 feet below the surface. The rock shifted again, and somehow his backpack was pushed off of him, leaving him with only the clothes on his back and his trusty multi-tool strapped to his hip. It was at this point he realized he was trapped and no one was coming to save him. Aaron knew that the sun would set soon, and without water or food, he wouldn't survive the night. But something kept him going. He thought if he stayed perfectly still, maybe he could keep his mind off of how thirsty he was. But after a while, the pain in his head went away and it was replaced by a terrible thirst. Aaron drank his own urine to quench his thirst, but it wasn't enough. In his delirious state, he began hallucinating. He started seeing bugs crawling on the rock face and mice darting around him. But in reality, there wasn't another living being within miles of him. The next morning, he woke up and felt like he was going crazy. He realized that he needed to get himself out of there if he was going to make it. But how could he free himself? His only companion was a dull multi-tool. It was designed for cutting metal, but it would be very difficult to use it on bone. Still, he gave it a try and spent a couple hours trying to cut through his forearm with the dull blade. He decided to take a break, and that's when the hallucination returned. He saw a mouse running toward him with blood dripping down its mouth. He tried to swat it away, but his hand slipped and the multi-tool sliced into his flesh. That's when he knew he wasn't going crazy. He was actually stuck, and his only hope of getting free was to do what he'd been doing all along. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and cut deeper. He managed to cut through his radius bone, severing the blood vessels and nerves, but there was still the problem of the ulna bone. But then something unexpected happened. The dull blade from the multi-tool sliced right through the ulna. That same dull blade that had failed to cut through his forearm earlier was now cutting through his bone. With renewed determination, Aaron hacked at the bone until it snapped. Finally, he was free. As soon as the bone broke, adrenaline surged through his body. He felt like he could run forever. Now that he was free, he looked around to see where he was. He realized he was still 100 feet below the rim of the canyon. But that wasn't going to stop him. He began climbing up the canyon wall, using every bit of strength he had left. His vision was blurry and his head pounded, but he didn't care. After 6 long days, he was finally free. Once he reached the top, he walked out of the canyon and collapsed. A hiker happened upon him and immediately called 911. When the police arrived, they were amazed to find him alive. He told them he had been trapped in the canyon for 6 days and had amputated his own arm with a dull multi-tool. They rushed him to the hospital where he made a full recovery. But it wasn't without its complications. The stump of his arm refused to heal, probably due to the infection. So doctors had to remove part of his arm above the elbow. In an interview years later, Aaron said, "I always wanted to be whole, but now I am grateful to just be alive." After everything he had endured, doctors were surprised that he didn't suffer from PTSD, but he did suffer from something else. He couldn't come to terms with the fact that he had lost his arm. He became angry at the world and began drinking heavily. He attended Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, but he never admitted that he had a problem. One day he had an epiphany. He realized he had a choice. Either dwell in anger or choose to be happy. He chose happiness. He worked through his problems, and today he is a different person. In fact, he has gone back to the place where he was trapped and climbed out of the canyon without any assistance. He's also hiked the Grand Canyon, something he always dreamed of doing. He's written 2 books, published several articles, and given numerous talks about his experience. And if you think that's impressive, wait till you hear this. In 2017, Aaron summited Mount Everest. He had been training for months to be able to withstand the freezing temperatures and low oxygen levels. And he made it to the top. When asked what his plans were for the future, he said, "I don't ever plan on stopping." 18 years ago, doctors weren't sure if Aaron would live or die. And today he is busier than ever, proving that anything is possible. Today, Aaron lives by a simple mantra, which is to find beauty in the struggle. He has learned that sometimes you have to struggle in order to find the beauty. And that is the key to his success. Have you heard Aaron's story before? If so, let us know in the comments. Also, please share this video with anyone who needs to hear this message. She quickly jumped into the water, but as she reached for them, she saw that the water was filled with sharp rocks. And when she pulled her hand back, she saw that she had cut herself badly. If that wasn't bad enough, the wound immediately started burning like fire. Julianne pulled her hand out of the water and looked down. She saw that hundreds of tiny red bugs had crawled onto her skin. These weren't ordinary insects. They were bullet ants. Their name comes from the fact that their sting feels like being shot at. Bullet ant stings are incredibly painful and can even knock you out. Julianne ripped off her clothes and ran away, screaming as the bullet ants chased after her. When she finally managed to escape them, she noticed that the river had become wider and deeper. It was too deep for her to wade through, so she tried walking along the bank. But the further she walked, the darker it got. Soon, she couldn't see a thing. Julianne was terrified. She had no idea where she was or what kind of animals were lurking around her. She spent a terrifying night in the dark jungle, listening to the sounds of nocturnal animals all around her. The next day, she awoke to the sound of birds tweeting, and she knew that she had to do something quickly if she wanted to survive. Walking along the river had led her into uncharted territory, far away from where the plane had crashed. At least she had plenty of food around her, though. All she needed to do was figure out which berries were safe to eat. Eventually, Julianne came across a group of huts and saw some people tending to crops. She rushed towards them, and when they saw her, they screamed in surprise. Julianne was covered in blood-sucking insects, and her hair was tangled and matted. She was also disoriented and barefoot. The villagers had never seen anything like this before, and Julianne didn't speak the local language, so they couldn't communicate. Julianne was afraid that the villagers might think she was crazy and kill her, so she started drawing pictures in the dirt to explain what had happened to her. Eventually, they understood and took her in to treat her wounds and give her food. Turns out that the girl had walked 11 days through the jungle and crossed rivers infested with biting ants and deadly creatures. She had fought off swarms of insects and gone without food and water, surviving on nothing but some poisonous fruit. The girl's ordeal didn't end there, though. After staying with the villagers for a few days, she had to be taken to a hospital in Lima. Julianne was treated for severe insect bites, dehydration, and malnutrition. But miraculously, she made a full recovery. Everyone was shocked that Julianne had managed to survive such a traumatic experience. Many people thought that she must have been very lucky to have survived the plane crash. But in reality, she had done everything right. When she fell out of the plane, she protected her head with her arms, which probably saved her life. After the plane crashed, she made sure to stay near the river so that she could get fresh drinking water. And when she encountered dangerous animals, she knew how to escape them. But even so, Julianne's story could have ended tragically. For example, when she ate the poisonous fruit, she put her life in her own hands. Also, when she waded through the biting ants, she risked losing consciousness and drowning in the river. And when she got lost in the dark jungle, she could have easily been killed by jaguars or anacondas. In the end, it was Julianne's quick reactions and determination to live that helped her survive. She managed to escape every dangerous situation she found herself in, and she never gave up hope. Today, Julianne Kopeck is a strong and determined woman who is not afraid of anything. She knows that she is capable of surviving anything life throws at her. In an interview, she said that she doesn't want to remember everything that happened to her. but she does want to use her experience to help others. She hopes that by sharing her story, she can inspire people to never give up in the face of adversity. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed this terrifying tale of survival. Now it's time to make your voice heard. Comment below and let us know what you thought of the video. If you liked it, don't forget to give us a thumbs up and subscribe for more amazing stories.